Good afternoon and welcome everyone to SAMA's 2020 Municipal Administrator Training Session. We're glad you could join us here today. My name is Sean Cooney and I work with SAMA's Technical Standards and Policy Division. And I'm joined by my colleague, Kevin Grote, who works with our Assessment Services Division. We're pleased to have an opportunity to present to you here today remotely. We look forward to a productive and beneficial session for you. Hopefully everyone is signed in safely using Zoom. We do have an agenda that I'll get to in just a moment, but first just a couple housekeeping items regarding Zoom. As you join, you'll note all attendees are muted, and that's by default just to eliminate any background noise. We do plan to have a question and answer session towards the end. So there's two ways we can do this. You can answer using a question and answer module in Zoom. And so you can log your questions, we'll get to them at the end. Or when we move to the session at the end, you can raise your hand and we'll answer questions at that time. There's also a chat feature and you can use this to communicate with the technical support if you're having any difficulties. And also you can email at the email you see there, support@webinarsolutions.ca. So with that, we'll get underway. If you do need any of those functions during the presentation, they're shown here in laptop, phone, and tablet format. All right, Kevin and I want to give you kind of a well-rounded presentation. We're moving into a revaluation in 2021, so we're going to be bringing out all new values for your municipalities. So we thought it is a good time to do an assessment system overview. So I have a few slides on the basics, the fundamentals of the assessment system in Saskatchewan. And Kevin is going to speak to how we value property, the three approaches to value. So we'll do a bit of a background on that, and that sets the stage for talking about the 2021 revaluation. And we'll give you a bit of an update in terms of the timelines for the reval, where we're at in the process in terms of delivery, and also we're going to look at some preliminary trends. So we'll give you a sense of how values are changing over the 4-year cycle, moving to a new base state. Lastly, we're going to do a bit of a demo session. We'll have a bit of a break, a 5-minute break between. We'll set up, and Kevin is going to demo My SAMA, and one of the services within the portal is SAMAview. So I'll do a demo of that as well. Two very powerful tools for local administrators. We want to give you just an update on that and then answer any questions you have. So we'll move to a question and answer session at the end. So if you have any questions, you can log them as we go through the Q&A, and we'll have an open session and discussion at the end. All right, I'm going to start with an assessment system overview. As I mentioned, we're moving to a reval, and there's some basics. As a local administrator, if you know some of the fundamentals, you will have a really good advantage in terms of understanding assessment and revaluations. First of all, SAMA as an organization, just to give you a sense of the agency, we're governed by the Assessment Management Agency Act, and we're governed by a 7-person board of directors. We have two broad sets of responsibilities. One is assessment governance. So we're overseeing an assessment system with $250 billion in assessment, and that translates into $2.1 billion in taxes for local municipalities, over 50% of the revenue that local municipalities use, and also it funds education in the province. As part of the governance function, we have a policy mandate, and through our advisory committees and our stakeholder groups, we are developing policies, assessment publications, and kind of setting the groundwork for assessment rules in the province. We also have a quality assurance function. So we have a role confirmation and primary audit responsibility. We have a centralized computer system of assessments for the province. We manage communication around assessment and with liaison and stakeholders. And finally, a safety net for the province in terms of assessment services. The other broad area that SAMA looks after is assessment services. This is the area Kevin works in, providing assessment services to all but 4 municipalities in the province of Saskatchewan, all but the cities of Regina, Saskatoon, Prince Albert, Swift Current. So as part of this function, Assessment Services Division is valuing close to 900,000 properties They do this through annual maintenance programs and general re-inspections, and that's to keep the physical information up to date and current so you have accurate assessments. And then we'll talk about the revaluation here today. Of course, every 4 years, we update all values in the province, and that is a major responsibility of assessment services as well. And then lastly, supportive value. So if a property is appealed, we need to support the valuation that we've done, and that's part of the work that assessment services does. All right, in terms of the assessment system, we'll start with legislation. That sets the highest level set of rules for the work that we do. You should also be aware of board orders. We're going to move to that next. That's the next level of information or foundational authority for the work we do. And lastly, we'll talk about the publications that have the rules for valuing property in the province. Mass appraisal and equity are key features of the system, and we're going to talk about that. We have a 4-year revaluation cycle. So at the end of 2020, the current cycle will be ending, and we're moving into a new cycle in 2021. And with that, we're changing base dates. So we're going from a January 1, 2015 base date and updating all our values by 4 years. So all the values that you see coming out to the local municipality for the 2021 roll reflect a point in time, and it's January 1, 2019. And that will be updated in another 4 years to capture the economic growth or change in property. Very helpful to know as well, as a local administrator, there are 2 valuation standards in the province. We have a regulated property assessment valuation standard, and this is for properties that don't typically sell. They are regulated, and using the formulas, rules, and principles in the assessment manual, we value various property types, and I'll speak to that in a minute. Everything else in the province that can be valued using market information or sales or property rental income information is assessed according to the market valuation standard. So any property in your municipality falls into one of those 2 main categories. Also important to understand, assessment is based on the principle of ad valorem. That is a Latin term that means according to value. And quite simply what we're saying is, as assessors, we are striving for a one-to-one relationship between property values, as measured typically by sales, and property assessments on an overall basis. We're measuring the value in exchange. So when we do our market analysis or we come up with new costs for our regulated properties, we're always keeping this in mind because we want a stable, predictable, and transparent source of funding for municipalities and the education sector in our province. So that's an important principle. Getting back to the 2 standards in the province, property is divided pretty much along these lines. The regulated property assessment standard set out in legislation has the force of law, and it tells us that 5 types of property will be valued using regulated procedures. That is heavy industrial property, resource production equipment of oil and gas in mines, transmission pipelines, railway, roadway, and agricultural land. So the formulas, rules, and principles in the manual help us to value these properties. They set out the rates as of the base date and the models that we'll use, and everything else falls into the second standard. That's the non-regulated property assessments. And we are using a market valuation standard to value residential property, commercial property, essentially anything that has sales and market information that we can build a valuation model with. And Kevin will talk about the approaches to value that we're using. The market valuation standard is defined in legislation, and this is really important. If you're dealing with a property owner and they're curious about how we came up with their valuation, it's important to note that we use mass appraisal. And mass appraisal, as defined in legislation, is a process of preparing assessments for a group of properties as of the base date, using standard methods, employing common data, and allowing for statistical testing. Essentially what we're saying is, unlike a fee appraiser that will go out and look at a single property with a few comparables, SAMA and appraisers in mass appraisal are looking at all the market information, all the sales that are out there. We need to digest that information through mass appraisal processes using techniques to value the property. So we're using things such as multiple regression analysis to do residential where there's enough information. So we're looking at valuing all the property, which is quite different from a fee appraiser. We're estimating the market value of the estate in fee simple of the property. And market value, if you're looking at the textbook definition from legislation, is the amount that a property should expect to realize if the real estate fee simple interest is sold in a competitive and open market. So it has to be an open market transaction between a willing buyer and a willing seller, both acting prudently, and that there's no undue stimulus on the property. So if somebody asks what types of sales we're using the same sales a fee appraiser would use. We're using sales that occur in the open market. They're not encumbered, they're not influenced, so that we have a fair and accurate valuation in the end. And that's the third point. We reflect typical market conditions for similar properties. So when we build our models, we're considering comparability. And lastly, we need to meet quality assurance standards established by order of the agency. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail, but that's an overall level of value that we must meet for every municipality in the province. All right, we're leaving legislation and we're moving into board orders. And a lot of folks don't know that there are 4 key board orders for every revaluation. Why they're important is they give us the ground rules heading into a revaluation in terms of what we're valuing, what point in time, what information we can look at, and what standards we need to achieve. The first order is the base date order. Most folks will be familiar with this. And it sets the base date, which of course will be January 1 of 2019 for this upcoming 2021 revaluation. And all our valuations are geared towards that point in time. So it's a retrospective value. When the 2021 assessments come out, if property owners are coming and saying, look, my property sold 3 months ago, here was the value. Well, unfortunately, we have to value to a point in time, and that is why we have a base date. The market evidence order is another key set of rules. Essentially, what the market evidence order tells us is we can consider market sales information, income rental information up to the base date. Anything after that point in time is not considered in our models. There is a fiscal year with income producing properties, so it goes to May, but essentially the market information has to be in our hands for us to build the mass appraisal models. And so that market evidence order is also important, and you can explain to property owners again why a sale that occurred 3 months ago is not in the analysis, but will be reflected in the future. And everyone is on an even footing that way. Markets change, residential can go up, but everyone is treated at the same point in time in a fair and similar manner. The third standard is, order is the quality assurance standard. This is an overall level of value, and assessors in the province for each municipality have to achieve a 0.95 to 1.05 overall level assessment to sale price level. And that is determined for all property in a residential grouping and non-residential grouping. So using the res, for example, all the properties that we used in our residential market analysis, both land and improved, will go into that grouping, and we determine an assessment to sale price ratio. That has to be between 9.5 and 1.05. Having said that, the order asks or directs us to work towards assessment to sale ratio of 1, and quite often that's what we do achieve for mass appraisal. So it's a quality check on the work we do. If you're interested for your municipality, the standard is actually published to SAMA's website. So you can go in, you can look up your municipality, and you can see what your quality assurance standard is for the 2021 reval. That again will be, for the current reval, that will be updated for the 2021 in due course here in the next couple months. The last order gives authority to the provincial assessment manual. So we have a 2019 manual, and we need an order to give it force of law. It's approved by our board of directors, and then it's approved by the Minister of Government Relations. So these 4 orders are in place for the cycle 2021 to 2024, and they'll be updated again for the next revaluation. The last thing I want to touch on in terms of the framework or the foundational pieces of our assessment system are publications. So SAM is responsible for assessment policy. Here you can see our new manual and guide ready to go for the 2019 base year, 2021 reval. And there are kind of four main sources of direction we look to. The first is the 2019 base year manual. And we talked about the regulated properties. This is where we go to find the formulas, rules, and principles to value regulated property. In terms of the market valuation standard, SAMA has a cost guide, and here you can see the second resource is our 2019 cost guide. This has information in terms of valuing land, cost on the residential and commercial property by way of the cost approach. And in terms of commercial, it's non-standard commercial that we cannot value using Marshall and Swift, which is the final piece I'll talk about. So it is a very instructional, a cost approach focused resource for assessors in Saskatchewan. And lastly is the market value assessment in Saskatchewan handbook. Now this document, it's not tied to the base date, so it's a living document and it gets updated as needed. And what this has is mass appraisal best practices for valuing mostly income producing properties. So if we were going to value things like a shopping mall or a hotel or a motel or retail by way of the rental income approach, we would go to this document for guidance on best practices. Again, this does not have the force of law, nor does the cost guide. Only the manual has the force of law, but it is very persuasive. And in appeals, both of those publications get referred to quite frequently. If we deviate from those resources on the market valuation standard, we often find ourselves having to explain why to appeal tribunals and so forth. The last publication I want to make you aware of is Marshall and Swift. This is an internationally recognized cost service. And we have all of our commercial costs coming from the Marshall Valuation Service. So if it's not a local model that we build for SAM's cost guide, we're going to Marshall Valuation Service. And that's the source for the costs for commercial. And likewise, we have a residential cost handbook that really provides the costs that we use in our residential cost approach. Of course, we do some adjustments for local conditions to these costs, but it really is an excellent source of information for costing, and it's used right across North America. This slide I just want to leave with you, and it's kind of helpful, I guess, as if you're getting people coming into the municipal offices asking about where we're working off of. You can see in the second column that the manual and the cost guide are base year specific, so they get updated every 4 years. The second column, the purpose, you can see the manuals for regulated property, whereas the other two are for the market valuation standard. And in the final column, force of law, the manual has the force of law. We cannot deviate from it, whereas the guide and handbook do not have the force of law, but they're persuasive and referred to on our assessment appeals. If you're interested in looking at the publications, they're available for both the current revaluation cycle and for the 2021 reval cycle on SAM's website. There's a link to documents and libraries, and from there you can go to manuals, handbooks, and guides. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, and he's going to talk about the 3 approaches to value.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Sean, for that. And thank you for the remote too. Let's see. So you might be looking at that picture and you're wondering why are there a picture of 3 different tools and 3 different wrenches in particular. So if I were to ask my son, what is the common use for all 3 items? He would answer, they can all be used to hammer. Well, that's right, they can be, and it's not an ideal use of them by any means, but actually they're designed for fasteners, nuts and bolts in particular. And this is just like the 3 approaches to value that as appraisers you use when you're valuing a property. There's 3 different approaches. They all relate to determining the value of the property, and they all have advantages when they should be used. But the common denominator to all 3 approaches to value is you need sales of the properties before you can use any of them, because the sales are used to build the relationship, or you might call it a relationship, or build a model to value properties with. So start off with the cost approach, and if you want to go back to the tool analogy, that would be like the big crescent wrench. It's, you know, it's old, it's stable, it's adjustable, might not be great for fine work on a watch, for example, but it's, again, adjustable and simple to use. When doing the cost approach, we begin by determining the land value of the property, and that's simply looking for patterns in the sales of vacant land parcels and looking to see what areas, if we can group them into areas called neighborhoods, and what rate per square foot or rate per acre, what's the common value that they're trading at, and what other attributes, you know, such as paved street or items similar to that, other location variables, what drives the value. Once we have the land value determined, we start on the building value. And it's really a two-step process. As Sean mentioned, we have our cost guides to determine what's the typical construction cost. And that's province-wide average, but we need to take that typical construction cost and get it back relating to the local market. And so what we do is we know the construction cost, we know the selling price, we take the land value, estimated land value away from the selling price, and we can say, this is how much the buildings are generating. And we compare that building value that's in the sale price, compared it to the construction cost, and what we end up with is a ratio, and or at the end we'll take and call it a math. So then you take the land value and add the building value, and that's simply the cost approach. The next approach, sales comparison approach, it requires lots of sales in order to build a model in this fashion, but it's incredibly fast for, you know, once you have the number of sales. So you can think of it like that electric impact wrench. It can go through a lot of things quicker than you can do manually. And that's the same way for the analysis. We can analyze a lot of sales and a lot faster than doing a lot of manual checks that we would do in the cost approach. And in mass appraisal, you use regression software, and that's basically just a computer program that looks to say what variables are people using when they're determining how much to pay for a property. And you know, it's usually common variables like size, location, the age of the property, the quality of construction, and it builds a model just based on those variables only. Finally, probably the most misunderstood approach is the income approach. And it is simply looking for a relationship between what an investor would pay for a property and the value they're willing to pay for it. Now, as everyone always loves, you know, nice definitions. All this definition is simply saying is how much money, when I invest in this property, how much income will I get in return for it over the lifetime I hold the investment? What do we need for the income approach? Well, it starts off asking the owners for their income and expense statements. And it's not their income tax statements, because that's their personal income. It's the income and expenses related to the building, because we're interested in the building value. And once we have that, we can determine typical market rents, typical expense ratios, and we keep that information, of course, confidential, only used for the assessment purposes. Once we have all the rents, we can determine what potential gross income, and that's the ideal. If there were no expenses, how much money would you be taking in? And that's determined at 100% building usage or 100% occupancy. But as we all know, expenses are a part of life. And so we'll take and see what's the average vacancy, or for hotels, what's the average occupancy? And then also, are there any kind of losses due to people not paying the money that they owe? So then we get down to, and we'll start taking a look at these expenses. So if you think of it, you start off with your potential gross income and you take away the vacancy and collection losses, and that's something called the effective gross income. Now, for some types of income models, this is all we need to do. And like, for example, in apartment buildings, we can build a ratio or a relationship to selling price at that point. For other types of properties, general commercial, hotels, motels, we take off other expenses, and then you're left with the net operating income. And when we're looking at property expenses, if we're doing that, there's some expenses that are allowed and some that aren't allowed. And typically the ones that aren't allowed are because part of them are related for, in another category we'll use, like a capital improvement, we'd be doing something called a reserve for replacement. Other items like depreciation and your mortgage payments, those aren't allowable expenses. The mortgage payments, you're getting, that's the return of the investment, not what's going on the investment. So it's a little different than say, for example, for income tax. But the final question comes down to, and it took a few years into my career before I finally realized, all the income approach is saying it's a ratio. It's either something that you divide into, which is a capitalization rate. So if you, or it's a multiplier. And depending on the property type, apartments, for example, will use multipliers. Other properties, we use capitalization rates. And simply all the capitalization rate is if you take the income the property generates and divide it by the selling price and express it as a percentage, that's the capitalization rate. Then when you want to get a value of another property, you take their income divided by that capitalization rate and you get the value. So like I said, the income approach in those three wrenches would be kind of like that little small ratcheting wrench. It's very specific, does a great job for what it was designed for, but it's not really adaptable across a multitude of different property types. And I'm not sure if this is still me. Here we go. So preliminary values, we delivered those to the province in April, and we're currently in the final stages of delivering preliminary values to the balance of the municipalities. Some of the municipalities where we are utilizing the income approach, it's taken a little bit longer than we anticipated to get those values out, but if you haven't received them, you should be expecting to receive them within the next couple of weeks anyways. And we've already had some council meetings, and if you're interested in that, please get a hold of your local office and ask to have a presentation, and we can either do it virtually like this, or we will, with appropriate safety measures, come out and do presentations in person as well. Final values, right now, we're expecting to get the percentage of values from the province sometime in late 2020. We don't really have a time frame on that, but as soon as we have those, and we can start calculating the final values, and as early as January, we'll be able to start delivering. If we get the values sooner, we'll be able to, maybe mid-December, start delivering values, and we'll start delivering them out either with the maintenance included, if that's your preference, or you can get your maintenance as a separate package. Then beginning in mid-February, we'll start to update SAMAView with the new revaluation numbers, 2021 numbers, and people will be able to see both 2021 and 2020 values there.
Great, thanks, Kevin. All right, I'm going to finish off here this section with talking about the revaluation timelines in terms of the province. We talked about the orders being in place. Kevin talked about the timelines for SAMA delivering. Provincially, Saskatoon, Regina, Prince Albert, and Swift Current are all very close to finalizing their values, so they're prepared for the 2021 assessment roll year. As Kevin mentioned, we're waiting for percentages of value for 2020. We need those percentages to load them on our computer systems, to recalculate everything, to give you final values for the 2021 roll year. A couple things we should mention are some of the challenges for the 2021 revaluation. And of course, everyone's aware of the pandemic which has occurred and the economic fallout that hit the markets. It just wasn't equities and other things, it was real estate as well. So we've kind of been watching month by month since it occurred. The challenge is our base date of Jan 1, 2019 is prior to the impact of COVID. So when values come out within your municipality, you may get a question as to why doesn't it reflect what's happened since COVID? Why isn't it right up to date? And for the very reasons I discussed previously, we have a 4-year cycle and we have a base date. Having said that, the impact seems to be mostly isolated to certain property types. So you're going to see, maybe depending on your municipality, your location, COVID has hurt property values. I'm going to show you some provincial trends suggesting that things aren't too bad provincially, but it could vary locally. 2 specific sectors that have been hit are accommodation properties. So hotels and motels are suffering at this time. And that's an example of a markets property. And on the regulated side, the oil and gas sector, and I'm sure other related sectors are hurting as well. So we are planning a review of our oil and gas models for the 2025 revaluation. So we've begun work on that to look at our models. But this is a challenge that we're continuing to monitor, and we'll look at some trends that are quite interesting in terms of what's happened since the base date. The other thing we're facing within SAMA is a high volume of appeals. Of course, appeals move through the Board of Revision to the Saskatchewan Municipal Board. Currently, we have 15 outstanding Court of Appeal cases. So the highest court looking at different assessment matters. It's split almost evenly between regulated and market valuation standard properties. But we need those decisions because they'll tell us, they'll guide us in terms of how we're valuing and assessing property. The problem or the challenge will be is if we get a precedent setting decision after the 2021 assessment roll is struck, we might have a situation where we're having to react. So for the most part, things are under control. We're hopeful for good outcomes in each of those cases, but frankly, we do need to get some decisions to give us guidance on the market valuation standard especially. So just a couple risks we're monitoring. I'm going to show you some trends, so you guys will get kind of a sneak peek of what is coming for the 2021 revaluation, and we're going to look at provincial trends. But you have to realize that a trend that you look at provincially with all of the data differs from what you'll see locally or at a neighborhood level or a property level. So you'll see some trends, but realize that we understand it changes depending on your local municipality or market neighborhood in the province. Provincially, we took all of SAMA's assessments. We combined them with the cities of Saskatoon, Regina, Prince Albert, and Swift Current. And for the 2020 roll year, the 100% assessed value was $250 billion. So that is the total assessment for 2021 is going up to 266 billion, a multiple of 1.07. It's important to note these are values as of April 1st of 2020. So these are the preliminary numbers we were looking at. We've since done additional market analysis and fine tuning and updating of our databases, but it gives you a sense of where the values are going. And that multiple, although it is an increase, it's not as big an increase as we've seen with previous revaluations. And the taxable assessment trend is fairly similar. All right, here is a look at our preliminary trends for 2021, broken across the 8 main classes of property. And the standout increase is by far arable land and non-arable land at 25% and 21%. So last time, for the last reval, agricultural land went up a fair bit. It's still going up. And we'll look at sales trends indicating that it actually went up after the base date as well. Residential is dropping 0.93 overall. Seasonal is at 1. Multifamily is at 0.97. Off to the right of the agricultural, which is commercial, is 1.12 time increase. Pipeline and railway are linear property at 1.17 and elevators at 1.17. Provincially, 1.07 increase. So although we're seeing increases in certain properties, it's not as large as previous revaluations. So this next slide is a busy slide, and I apologize for that, but it gives you a sense of what's happened over the last 3 revals. You can see the green bars, that's the 2021 reval. The blue bar on the bar chart is the 2017 multiple, and the orange or brownish color is 2013. And you can see going back on the left side of the graph, residential almost doubled for the 2013 reval. Seasonal doubled, and multifamily. So huge increases. And like I just mentioned, for the last reval in 2017, our agricultural land more than doubled, arable and non-arable or pasture. And likewise, as you move down the chart, you can see other properties took turns at very large increases, such as commercial at 1.57, 1.14, and a little bit less this time. So that gives you a sense of the change. And I think the takeaway or the message here is values are increasing, but they're not increasing as dramatically as past revaluations, which is likely good for the very reason we talked about, and that is COVID. We're not seeing massive increases provincially. All right, we do have just a kind of a glimpse at what's happened after the base date. So we went to our database of sales, and we're looking at residential sales trends. We've mapped them out quarterly, and you can see that on the x-axis on the diagram here. And there's 2 red lines. The first one on the left is the last base date, so you can see where sale prices were. The far right is the Jan 1, 2019 base date, and you can see a modest decrease towards the base date. Of course, COVID has happened after the base date, and it goes out many months up until just recently, and I think we're right up until the second quarter of 2020 here. And what you can see is yes, residential values overall, on an overall basis, are going down ever so slightly. It's kind of stabilized, and you can see the very final trend that we're looking at is up again. So I think the message here is residential values, although they've gone down over the 4-year period, after the base date and through COVID, they've stayed relatively stable. And this is a very similar diagram for the arable land in the province. And again, a quarterly chart and the same parameters. And you can see the left line indicating the Jan 1, 2019 base date. And that's kind of where we intersected for values for the work that we're doing. After the base date, you'll see increases. So it's not going up exponentially, but agricultural land is very stable and it is increasing, again, which is good given the situation economically in the province. So that is our initial portion. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then Kevin and I are going to move into some demonstrations. Kevin will be looking at the MySAMA portal, and I'll do a brief demo on SamaView. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, welcome back, and we'll get on to the demo right away here. And we will have time for questions and answers at the end. So, and again, if you've got any of those questions, you can put them in through the chat like Sean had indicated earlier on, or you can raise your hand there. But one thing before I get into the actual demo of my SAMA, in case you were wondering, back at the start of the year when we started having increased COVID-related measures, we were doing some reviews that we weren't able to go to the property, and we're planning to do a follow-up inspection. Just to let everyone know, we've identified those as being no charge when you see them on your callback list. And if they weren't identified as no charge, definitely get hold of the regional office and we can make that change. So now on to the MySAMA. So if you've never been here before, the website is simply mysama.ca. And when you first come in, you're going to be prompted to log in, and you want to. I'm not sharing the screen here. Okay. Thank you for that. And there we go. So here we are at MySAMA. I'm sharing now. Still not yet. There we go. Now we're good. Can hear me? There we go. Okay, thank you. Thanks for everyone's patience here. Anyways, here's the MySAMA, the first login part. And just to, again, you start off by going in as a municipality. And of course, you have to, this where it says municipality name code, that's actually required. We need to know where you're working from. So I'm going to log in here initially as if you've never been in before, just so you can see some of the prompts you'll get as a new user. And so I just start typing in, and you can type in the RM number, RM name, or town, and it fills in. And you can choose the remember me option, and then it'll remember at least your username and the community you're representing. If you have more than one community you work with, you can take and actually link accounts, so you can just switch back and forth between those, and that's documented in the help file. So the very first time you're in, or anytime we have an update to the user terms, they're all listed there. And once the account's been, you agree to the terms, you're in. So just basic overview. Like most websites, there's a profile settings where you can come in, and this is where you're going to find your logout button, as well as you can take and change your password and do various other settings. On the left side is the menu, and if you have a smaller monitor or want more screen space for the main part, you can click on the little hamburger menu up there and move it back and forth. You'll come in, and in this case, because this is a training database or a testing database, there isn't anything in it right at this point in time. So the first thing, if you're wanting to start your maintenance list, you'll come into your maintenance, and you're prompted to open a maintenance list. Now, this is our second year of having it, so it's important when you start it to make sure you choose the 2021 year, and say when you'd like your maintenance by. If you've picked a date from the previous year, it's going to go 1 year plus that date. And I'll just pick a date here, and I'll open the list. Right away, you'll notice if there's anything callbacks on any of your properties, and these are ones where our appraisers have identified a reason to review it again. Might be because of a sale on the property, or there wasn't a change, or there was a change last year that they noted that wasn't complete. And this is the opportunity to review those and give us feedback on whether or not you want us to look for them. And I think, so I'll go into that screen here, and you can see here, there is only one callback. And now my options are, I can either authorize it, or I can unauthorize it. And if, in this case, it looks like it's coming in because of some changes at ISC. And I can expand it. And if I authorize it and I submit it, then at this point in time, I can actually submit a maintenance list if I have one. But, and very first time you're in here, it's saying there's no requests. Now, you can think of a request as you can group as many properties on one request as you want, and you can have up to 10 requests open at a point in time if you want. But maybe I'm gonna do a couple lists, so I'll just simply go first list, and you can put notes in there if you want. Hit save, and now it comes time to add the properties. So I can add a property here. If I downloaded the Excel file and entered the information on the Excel file, I can import that file. If you're a Munisoft user and you export the file from Munisoft, you can import it. And I'm not sure the status of Munisoft. They were doing an update on the way they would export the files. Some users are experiencing problems with that. And again, if you're having some problems, feel free to contact our regional office. So I'll start by adding a property here, and I come into the property search, and if they're civic addresses, I can begin by just typing in the civic address, and it'll bring all the properties. So for example, here I started Railway Avenue, and I can search through and pick whatever property. If I'd had the street, the full civic address, like 400 Railway Avenue, I'll come back here. And it'll bring it up. I can search by the assessment ID, or I can search by legal land. And as soon as you basically start over 4 characters, it actually activates the search. And so I'll just grab a property here. If we have a picture on file, you see it comes up, and you have to put in the reason for the inspection. And so if it's let's see, move deck, and we do ask, and it'll bring in an owner name if it's there. And so I can take and modify that if I need to. And if the owner name's out of date on here, that's just the last name we had on file. If you have their phone number, that's great, or email, especially now if we're trying to collect some information remotely. You can also put in permit information if you have that, start date, if you have to know their date of construction start, so we're not going out before the construction started, that's very helpful as well. And I can take, and once I save it, then I can take and attach a file. If you've got a picture or a blueprint that you want to attach, attaching the file just opens up, and you can say blueprint, and then it's just the standard browser way of attaching files. And so you can keep building your list like this. And then if you submitted list, and so I'll submit this one, and you think, oh, I forgot to add something, you can make a new request. If you're wondering what you've submitted already, you can go to the submitted tab. And then as we begin to work on them, you'll start to find them in the in progress tab. Any point in time in the year, you can hit the little plus button here, and you can find out how many properties are being looked at currently, if they're any stage of completion that they're at. And these are updated every time you log into MySAMA. So it's as close to real time as possible. So I see there's one question regarding where can you enter 293s. If you're, I'll just, for example, go back in, and I can do it either here, and I can come in and put a comment on if it's something I've already submitted and I'd forgot to put that information in. And I can say, 293 exemption should be, and we'll just pretend this is in an RM. So, and as soon as this is done, the regional office is receiving a notification that this comment is being made, and they can make a comment back. If I'm just doing it right on the property, you can take, and I'll do another new one here, and we'll go second list because I'm not very creative right now, and add a property, and I'm going to look for something on Main Street. apparently there wasn't a main street in Star City. The other area you could put the 293 information on is you could actually put it right here on the reason for inspection. Otherwise, if you're looking for a way to do bulk 293 uploads, you can take and contact the regional office and we'll supply a file that you can enter that information in directly, and then we would upload it. So once you've submitted all your maintenance and you see and you get the notification, and you can see right now it's submitted, and as we work on it, it'll go into in progress, and the next, we have a few stages that we specify. One might be finalization. That means we've done all our inspections, we're just finalizing it in the office. When it gets returned back as that it's complete for the year, you'll actually get an email notification from the website, and it'll come from portal notifications. Just like when I submitted those callbacks, there would have been a email notification come through here. So there's the notification that the maintenance list was submitted. There was a notification, again, the email of the callbacks that were submitted. And probably sometime by mid next month, we'll actually have the ability for you to go in and either export the callbacks out, so you can actually have a record of the ones if you find that easier to review other than on screen. Again, you'll see the status of how things are proceeding through, and as well, then when you get the notice that your maintenance is ready, you'll come into your My Documents portion, and under the Annual Maintenance tab is where you would find any of those files. For this year, upcoming year, the reval reinspection is where all the reval related files are going to be dropped in here. And the one thing to note is we'll keep the files in there until there's a new set of files to replace them. But you won't have your 2020 maintenance files in there and 2021. We'll only keep one set of files in there for you at a point in time, and they'll relate to the current year. And overall, I think that's the main high points to show with regards to MySAMA and how to submit a maintenance list. Again, if you have any questions, put those in on the chat and be pleased to answer them, and either now or after Sean's done his SAMA View demo.
Thank you, Kevin. Socially distancing and transitioning here, so thanks for your patience. Yeah, so I'm going to look at the SAMA View functionality within MySAMA and take a look at some of the basic things that we can do in terms of searching and so forth. SAMA View is a GIS capable online database, so all of our assessment information is accessible through there. The public can search, view, compare assessments, so property owners in your municipality can do some groundwork before they decide to come to the municipal office. But also as municipal administrators, you have free access, no charge to use the service. So it is a very powerful tool. We do have commercial subscribers, so realtors, banks, fee appraisers, and so forth can subscribe to the service, and through a credit system and fees can access the same information. We've worked quite a bit on the new SAMA View, so we have summary information, property reports, a very robust map service, and satellite imagery, and we'll look at that in a moment. Some other things to add to SAMA View: a mobile-friendly interface. When you go to search, there's 7 different ways to search. We can geolocation automatically through your location in the province. And for paying users online payment and secure access through a personalized dashboard. One thing that is new about SamaView that some individuals may not know is we have access to prior year's assessment information. So rather than just one static set of assessments, we have multiple years. Yeah, public can come on and use it to look at 25 reports. So you get credits, and a public user will get 25 credits to look at their own properties. Administrators can use this, unlimited. And if you want additional information after this presentation, you can go, of course, to my SAMA and have a look at what is there. I'm going to just move into the demo. Just give me 1 second here. All right. So Kevin gave you the overview of my SAMA. Within my SAMA, you'll see an icon on the left or a menu into SamaView. There's also some additional information once you're in SamaView and you load the service. It will take you typically to a province level. You can turn on locational services, and it'll actually find out where you are in the province and will take you to that spot on the map. In terms of the menu, there is a help system on the left, and you're going to see some frequently asked questions. So if you are looking for some additional feedback on SamaView, if you want to peruse this later, you can see some additional information. A lot of helpful information there. On the top left, you'll see these hash marks. This is used to kind of hide the menu system, and it gives you a bit more real estate when you're looking at the map. If you hover over it, it will bring up the menu again, so it's pretty helpful that way. On the far right is the search functionality, and again, you can hide that search if you want to have a bit more map space. Otherwise, you can expose it and go from there. One thing I've been told is using SamaView, it's ideal if you're working through Chrome. It's one of the better browsers and works a little bit better. In terms of property search, it's best to go in and pick a municipality. I'm going to go with the town I assessed many years ago, Fort Capel. And once you enter the municipality, it of course will bring up the map. And with the menu system, you can zoom in to a particular location on the map or zoom out. You can also use the scroll wheel on your mouse. So it's very easy to hone in on what you want to see. You can also turn on the imagery. It gives you a really nice perspective in terms of a top-down view. You can see right into the properties. So you can see the demarcation of the property lines. You can see superimposed the assessment ID and the assessment. So again, very helpful in terms of finding a property in a particular location. As I mentioned, when you're searching a property, you've got a lot of options now. It's a little bit more detailed than previously. So you can search by assessment ID, 2 types of legal land description, basic and advanced, civic address, ISC parcel number, condo plan, and original quarter. So I'm in Fort Capel. I'm going to look at a civic address, and you can start just by typing in the address that you're looking for, and it will search it out. So I'm looking at a property here. Once you find the property you want, you select it, it will take you there automatically on the map. And you can zoom in from here as well, and you can look at other properties. So if you're looking at comparing your assessment to a neighbor's property, it's ideal. As you do that, you're going to see some summary information on each of those properties coming up in this little viewer. As you pick a property, we searched out 32 Willow Crescent. You can see a picture, if there's a picture of the property, and some basic assessment information. If you want to return to it on the map, there's Go To on Map. It'll take you right back to the property. The other thing you can do with this is dock this summary information to the top right, so it's not obscuring your view of the property through the map. And from there, you can choose to look at some general property information. So we'll go to that functionality. And if we have a picture again, it will display. I mentioned previously, you can look at multiple roll years. So here's the 2018 roll year and the 2019, and the assessment hasn't changed on this particular property. Scrolling through the information, you're going to see an overview of the property, basic land area, residential building, and then some values broken out by the improvement and the land and totals. So that gives you some basic information, and that is free for viewing. And then you can choose to generate a detailed report. So you can look at either a general property report. The detailed has a little bit more information, but I'll just pick this one. It'll ask you to confirm, and you'll note here it's free for municipal administrators. Normally that would cost a credit if you're a subscriber. So you can pick that, and what it does right now is it's going into SAMA's database, it's loading up the information and drawing out the report, and here it is. So this gives you a lot more information, and this is helpful if you want to get right to the property profile in question. And here you can see that the land information is there in a lot of detail, details on the single family dwelling, basement, garage, deck, and so forth, and a breakdown of the values. From here, you can choose to download the report, you can print it, or when you're done with it, you close it out. And what happens is it will be sent to your email automatically. And I'll just see if I can pull up an example here. Yeah, so there is the email that came to my email address, PDF, and the report. So you've got it permanently for your reference for the future. I'll just close out that email. All right, so when you're done with the property, you close it through this button and you're back to your viewer. And again, you can see the entire municipality, scroll out, and you might want to look at a different format in terms of coming in at the search. And so I've got another property here we could have a look at. And we'll look at legal land description. Here's a basic. So I've got a property here. It starts with lot 48. I'll just see if this brings it up. All right. Lot 48 to 53 takes us in on the local co-op on Broadway in Fort Capel. Here you can see the property highlighted, the parking lot and the building. And again, there's the summary information. And you can go through the same process where you can generate the report, look at the details from there, and you can save that report if you want. And so it's the same idea, but just gives you a sense of how powerful this is in terms of searching out properties, looking for comparables, checking out values, generating reports, and so forth. I'll just do one more search. I'm gonna, again, it's best to start with the municipality. I'm just gonna clear this off. So we'll go into the RM. There's a number of hamlets in 187, so I have to just scroll down to the RM level. Just give me 1 second here. Here we go, North Capel. So you select the municipality, again, it takes you to that level, and this has the imagery, and you can see the fishing lakes around Fort Capel and so forth. And we'll try a different search. This will be a legal land advanced search. Now, if you're looking at rural versus urban, you can pick that as a choice. And then you can move down to that description and put in the search. So we're going to go section 11, township 20, range 14, and search on that. And here we've got a property. I'll look at this northeast 11/2014. It brings up the property. And again, the same holds true. If there's a picture, you'll see it through SamaView. You can order that report. And you can see as you're searching out properties, it keeps that information on the right. So you can go back to those properties. Again, remember, you can use the go-to on map. In this case, you can actually zoom in on the property in question, and you can see the yard site. And this is the house that we're looking at here. So very, very helpful in terms of the imagery, 0.6 meter imagery, and search capabilities. And from there, you can really move around the whole map of Saskatchewan, move around any municipality and do your searches. So that concludes the SAMA View presentation here today. Now, Kevin and I are going to move to a question and answer session. If you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. I just wanted to mention as well, hopefully you're finding this information helpful and a good kind of refresher on the revaluation and some assessment basics in these tools, MySAMA and SAMA View. We also know there's municipal elections coming up, so if there's any new councillors that come into your municipalities and you think there might be some interest in similar training or more focused training, please let us know. We'd be happy to help out with that as well. So with that, I think we'll move to the question and answers. Just give us a moment while we set up here.
Okay, it looks like we got the questions up here, so I'll go from the bottom up, and the first question from David: is there an option to request no report be emailed? Yeah, if you're asking, can we email the reports? We can. We prefer the security of the portal. And I guess, David, if that doesn't answer your question, just please type in another question. Next one is from Reagan. How far back in years does SAMA? Let's see. I'll see if I can share this. There. So, how far does SAMA View hold assessments values for? SAMA View holds for 1 year, 1 year, the current year, and 1 year prior. And prior to that, we can handle requests back to currently up to 2005 directly in our office. But as computer systems age, at some point in time, we'd probably be looking at a 2017 and newer kind of time frame for being able to supply historical profiles. It's not showing still. I can see it here. Let's try it again.
Sorry, just if you're trying to share your questions, the audience will not be able to see them, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. Go from the top?
Yeah.
You said everyone can see these questions now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think everyone can see.
No.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to have the question and answers open.
Okay, yeah. So if you're not able to see the question answers on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a Q&A, and as they bring them up, they'll be there. So if you submit through callbacks, you have to enter those again through maintenance requests. You would only have to do that if you have something in addition that the callback isn't covering. You can also put a comment on that property if there's something else you want us to look at there. Deadline to submit the maintenance list. We ask that we get, I believe it's a 1 month time frame from, or actually, pardon me, it's a 60-day time frame from your last request to when you want your maintenance delivered by. You can work with the regional office outside of that time frame, and that's probably the best way of doing it. The next question is from Lee. How recent is the satellite imagery provided in Samoview? We get the imagery from FlySask, and so that we're a partner in the FlySask collaborative in the province, and so it all depends on when we're getting the flights, what areas are being flown in the province. So it's not imagery as of one date across the province. And if you're interested in a particular area, if you want to email myself, and that's kevin.grote@sama.sk.ca, I can actually look into the FlySask and determine the age for you. If there are multiple hotels in the municipality, do you value them all differently? Are they individually based? Is it over a period of time? So with hotels, it's based on, if they're on the income approach, it's based on the type of hotel and essentially what their estimated market rents would be. And that's based on the returns of similar hotels and even that properties, but it's the average. It's not their individual income statement determining their value. And as far as the time period, it depends on the base date. For example, coming up right away, we'll be using returns from 2015 to 2018 and to 2018 to determine the January 1st, 2019 values. And like Sean said, so that's pre-COVID. So any effects due to COVID won't be showing up necessarily, but of course the other effects of other economic downturns, for example, oil and gas in the southeast area, that will show up in both in the hotels, what the rates are charging and their occupancy levels. Will SAM be sending out 293 exemptions before the revaluation is sent out, or do RMs have to send this in after the assessments are received? We'll be asking our regional offices to find out what your preference is there, and we can work to get the 293 values included for you with the revaluation package, or we can send you out your numbers along with a listing of the revaluation, and we can work those in with a maintenance package. So it depends on the individual. And next question from David. The property report is generated and emailed. Is there an option not to have the report emailed? At this time, there isn't an option. And the main reason for that is because on for our corporate users and users that are paying for those searches, the email is their only for sure record that their search was successful and they've got a copy of it. And we've had some corporate users saying, well, we don't want that. The best option at that point in time is potentially either setting up a folder in your email folder to just send it, take care of it that way. And here's a question for Sean. What are gravel pits generally classified as?
Well, currently, gravel pits in the province are not accessible. They're viewed as a chattel and not accessible for that reason. So we're valuing the land, and that is kind of where it ends. One of the main problems with gravel pits is the fact that they're very difficult to identify, to track, and by the time we have them assessed, the use of that gravel pit could be done with. So through licensing and other means is the best way to address gravel pits, but right now they're not an accessible item. They're a chattel and non-accessible property.
There. I'm not sure if anyone else has any other questions.
There's one question. You're going to have to enter every 293 by a maintenance request on each property.
Okay, there was one question in the general chat of if we have to enter every 293 as a maintenance request. Is that okay? So in a typical year, like in a non-reval year, you could put the 293 amount you want on a property in the maintenance request. Or if you're doing as a result reinspection or revaluation and you have a large number of 293s, we can handle that separately through a separate upload. So no, you don't have to put them on individually like that. Would a playground on a private property be assessed? Would it have a high value in a resort residential area? And I'm assuming, Vanessa, I'll try and answer it as if you're wondering if there's any additional value for the playground equipment. And at this point in time, no, we don't assess playground equipment. You're welcome, Vanessa. There. Well, I'm not sure, Sean, did you have anything else here today?
No, just to thank everyone for attending today's session. We appreciate it very much. I think there's going to be a questionnaire regarding today's presentation. We appreciate your patience with this new technology and a webinar basis. And thank you for your time here today. And again, if there's interest in future training, please let us know. We'd be happy to do that for new council members or for any other purpose that you might think of. So again, thank you very much. Are there any final questions, Karine?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
one more here. Diana's concerned about ratepayers concerned about ag buildings being assessed. Any plans for this? As far as the agency goes, we have no plans for that because, of course, we're a creature of legislation, and currently under legislation, buildings used for agriculture related to the agriculture operational land are exempt. So we will only collect information on those buildings if they're used partially for ag and partially for other purposes. At points in times, we might gather it in our sales verification so we can remove that value from the sale so we can determine the value on the taxable portion of the properties. But no, the agency doesn't have any plans for it, but that's, again, that's up to the provincial legislature to determine whether or not they're looking at that. But I don't believe we've had any kind of indication that they're looking in that area at all. So. And is there going to be a printout notes from this webinar? I believe we can either have the presentation itself put up on our general website. Is that, I'm seeing some heads nodding in the room, so. And will the industrial division be ready to send out their information at the same time as the regular division? In as much as legislation allows, there's a few types of property that, for example, potash mines, they have a different legislated reporting date compared to regular property. Coal mines, again, different legislated date. So as much as possible, we'll have them going out at the same point in time. And where there is, where we can't get the information at the time that we have the regional maintenance ready, we'll be in discussions to determine how you'd like that sent out. And will a CCAN add value on the property? Yes, it will if it's there for more than 30 days. And as long as, if it was a CCAN sales location, of course, we wouldn't be assessing those because they're in storage and product. But if they're dropped onto a property and there for more than 30 days and the municipality notifies us, yes, we'll gladly add those on to the assessment. There. Well, again, thank you again for all attending, and hopefully next year we'll be able to see you live and in person, and if not, we'll look forward to having another event in this fashion as well.